Hey everybody, welcome back to the Morning Shot. I've got with me my guests, Byron and Raman.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Morning Shot. Let's try to get all of us into here. John, thank you for joining us. Thank you for inviting us onto your show. Very kind of you. Most importantly, we're going to show you a video, and we want your reaction to it. Sure. Time to come. So here it is.
Potrei farne tante altre di queste domande. A monte c'è quella che ci facciamo oggi: perché la famiglia è un nemico? Perché la famiglia fa così paura? C'è una risposta unica per tutte queste domande. Perché ci definisce, perché è la nostra identità. Perché tutto quello che ci definisce in questo tempo è un nemico, per chi vorrebbe che non avessimo più un'identità e che fossimo solamente schiavi, consumatori perfetti. E allora è sotto attacco l'identità nazionale, è sotto attacco l'identità religiosa, è sotto attacco l'identità di genere, è sotto attacco l'identità familiare. Non devo potermi definire italiana, cristiana, donna, madre, no. Io devo essere cittadino X, genere X, genitore 1, genitore 2, devo essere un numero. Perché quando sarò solamente un numero, quando non avrò più un'identità, quando non avrò più radici, allora sarò lo schiavo perfetto in balia della grande speculazione finanziaria, il consumatore perfetto. E questa è la ragione per la quale oggi noi facciamo tanta paura. Questa è la ragione per la quale oggi questo appuntamento fa tanta paura. Perché noi non vogliamo essere dei numeri, noi siamo qui per dire che noi non siamo dei numeri, noi difenderemo il valore della persona umana, di ogni singola persona umana, perché ognuno di noi ha un codice genetico unico e irripetibile. E questo, piaccia o no, ha del sacro. Lo difenderemo Dio, la patria e la famiglia, che fanno tanto schifo a qualcuno. Lo faremo per difendere la nostra libertà, perché noi non saremo mai schiavi e semplici consumatori in balia della speculazione finanziaria. Ecco la nostra missione, ecco perché oggi sono venuta qui. Scriveva Chesterton ormai più di un secolo fa, vediamo se ve lo trovo: fuochi verranno attizzati per dimostrare che 2 più 2 fa 4. Spade verranno sguainate per dimostrare che le foglie sono verdi in estate. Quel tempo è arrivato, signori. Siamo pronti. Grazie.
So what do you think?
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting, and I think that it's certainly very welcome. I think what you're seeing is a rejection of the globalized norms that are being enforced on many European countries by organizations like the WEF and the WHO. And I think you're starting to see countries reasserting their ability to determine their own outcomes. I think that what was disturbing about that video was the segment that was there before, where the European Commission saying that, well, if voters don't vote the right way in a country, they've got tools to be able to. I think you've got to respect democratic outcomes. The people of Italy have spoken. They've chosen that. That is the path that they would like to go down, and that must be respected. I don't think it's up to other multilateral or other global institutions to get involved where there's been a democratic outcome. I think that it is a reaction in Italy to what many Italians feel has been a loss of their sovereignty and their identity as a country, and they're pushing back. That is the democratic elected government. Why is it that when radical left wokes are elected into office, like Justin Trudeau, etc.,
they're part of the cabal. They're part of the elite, man.
But why is it when they're elected, like everyone must welcome that, it's seen as progressive, but when other electoral outcomes produce different results, the pearl clutchers that get on their high horse about it.
Yeah, we've seen this quite a bit now in Sweden, though. So we see it in Europe. So we've seen it in Sweden, we've seen it now in Italy, we've seen it in Poland, we've seen it in Hungary. So it looks like the Everton window is shifting to the right. I mean, unfortunately, the UK is still governed by a bunch of globalists in the form of Liz Truss, and in France you still got your favourite man, Macron. I know you love him. He's part of your heart and soul, right?
Huge fan, huge fan.
So, you know what? From your perspective, what do you think? I mean, people often accuse you of being a globalist WEF puppet. I mean, I haven't actually seen the Soros money yet, but if you could share it, we'd be very appreciative.
Well, if anyone is aware of the Soros donation, could they please send me the account to which it was inputted in? Because it's definitely not in any of the DA accounts. And
Maybe we could ask our chap at the ANC.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, there's this notion in the rounds that we got all this money from George Soros. Well, we absolutely don't have money from George Soros. And, you know, we obviously would like to have a few billions because it means we'll be able to take the fight to the ANC really, really hard at the next election. But certainly, if he has made the deposit, it hasn't arrived yet. Maybe it's under a couch somewhere. Who knows?
maybe. So, what do you think, Ramon?
So, sorry, it's very. Anyway, you'll appreciate this video. Seeing what she said there, is that liberal? Because the DA is a liberal party, and the words are mixed up and are getting into a lot of trouble with liberals for not understanding liberalism. What she said, like God, borders, family, is that a liberal position?
Well, it's certainly a position that we have as our party around family. We adopted a resolution 2 Congresses ago about the importance of the family unit in being able to build and grow societies, sustainable societies, and to tackle some of the societal ills. We've been very clear about strong borders. I'd also think that the labels, the old labels, are starting to wear a bit thin. I think if you look at Europe particularly, what's now described as liberal is very much more to the left. And what was described as conservative or right is now far more to the centre. So the political spectrum has shifted. So I think that it's a lot harder to apply those labels. Also, when you refer to somebody as a liberal in the American context, it's very different to referring to someone as a liberal in South African.
It's pure progressivism
in America. So it's about critical race theory, which is not what we're about. You know, that's the antithesis of what we stand for. We believe that you see people as an individual, you don't regard them as an envoy of their race. Critical race theory, as advanced by liberals in America, speaks quite the opposite. And you've got the whole AOC crowd there that are driving that agenda quite strongly. That's not the type of liberals that we are. We believe in the freedom of the individual to choose. We believe in democratic processes that achieve democratic outcomes and a respect for those outcomes. Which is why whenever the DA has taken over a city, or the big question that people ask us now is that, well, what if you take over in 2024, do you think the ANC will ever hand over the keys to you?
Yeah.
Well, if you respect democracy, that's how it happens. And certainly where we've lost power in places, we've given the keys back. And I think you've got to respect those democratic outcomes because they're a result of a process.
So what do you reckon? You mentioned there, obviously, critical gender theories. And so I'm going to ask you a very simple question, yeah? Do you know what a woman is?
Yeah, I mean, I believe fundamentally that people are born in biologies and that you have sexes. That is a biological factor. How people choose to identify, and this is up to their business, but you can't get away from the fact that there are biological characteristics. It's how reproduction happens, it's how various other biological processes happen. And so I don't think you can get away from that. You obviously respect people's choices because that's the individual choice that they make about how they choose to identify or how they want to live their life. But I don't believe that, for instance, in shared multiple bathrooms at schools, for instance, I think that where you have a separate bathroom, that's fine, anyone can use it. But I think that you should have girls and boys bathrooms at schools, particularly when there's a shared space, and because that is just a biological reality. So I think the attempts as well to force schools into certain decisions from a top-down approach is wrong. It should be ultimately the power resting with the parents at the school to develop those policies. I don't think that a government should be dictating to parents the policies that should be applied in those schools.
So 2024 comes around. WF knocks on your door. John, are you coming to our meetings? Yeah, our meetings. What are you going to say?
Well, what I would say is that I couldn't possibly fit it in between my meetings with the Illuminati and the New World Order and all those crew, because I mean that's what everybody thinks, and certainly if you look on Facebook. No, I'm serious. I mean, obviously, South Africa's sovereignty is important. I think there are some benefits of belonging to some multinational organizations, but that can never be at the expense of losing your own sovereignty as a nation. So I do worry about some of the sort of stuff being discussed, particularly in the WHO, around vaccine and vaccine mandates, etc. I think it should be up to countries, through their citizens, to decide how they approach these things. And that's why I was completely against compulsory vaccination. And again, it comes back to first principles about it being an individual's choice about their own bodily integrity and health decisions. It's up to the individual to decide. They should not be compelled or forced by governments to take steps around their own health and bodily integrity.
So just last question from me. Sorry, well, I just shifted here. National populism is on the rise. In Portugal, the Populist Party have reached the highest they've never seen before. Bolsonaro won in Brazil, Orban in Hungary, now Giorgia Meloni in Italy. I know you're a liberal party, but do you think there are some elements of populism that might be girded within liberalism that you can use in South Africa to gain more electoral votes or things like that? Or is that a problem that you wish to avoid?
Well, I think that you've got to be careful with populism, particularly if you see how it's being abused by certain political parties around immigration, where immigrants are being scapegoated. Now the ANC's also jumped on the bandwagon.
Yeah.
You're scapegoating immigrants for every single ill in South Africa, from crime to unemployment. And I think what that often does, it becomes a distraction from the real issues that are preventing progress in those regards. So I think you've got to be very careful with populism, that if you are practicing it, that you're doing it in the right way, and not in a way that's going to incite hatred for other people, or to target people who are not able to defend themselves. And I think that's the problem I have with populism in South Africa, that it is often used to scapegoat people, and often used and abused by politicians.
So sorry to interrupt. So Steve Bannon says the future is populist. You have to choose right or left. So I think South Africa is a classic example of left populism, but there's very little on the right, which is borders, family, God. Most South Africans are religious. Do you think that you can fill some of that void while remaining true?
I think that what we would rather do is be at the centre, the rational centre, and bring in the elements from both sides that we believe are able to move the country forward. I don't think the DA as a sort of liberal democratic party would ever go to the far right, but I do think that there needs to be far more centralism. And I think this is what's happened in places like America, where you see the pendulum that swings wildly in the last 3 election cycles. So the election of Trump was a reaction to the wokeism, critical race theory, and it went to Trump. Biden's election and Harris's election was the reaction to that. And you've got this pendulum swinging wildly, when in the past, what you generally have is a Democratic candidate who would tack right in the primaries and then come back to the centre.
Yes.
And you ended up with the Bill Clinton and those. And I'm not sure the Republicans, they would tack a little bit left and then come back to the centre. And I think we've got to find that centering again, where we're dealing with things on a rational level, not on emotional levels, and we're doing what's in the best interest of the country and its citizens, not based on populism. Because sometimes responsible politicians have to make unpopular decisions that don't necessarily, the country may not want. Things like austerity. If we got into power, we'd have to, for instance, cut the civil service quite dramatically. Now, that may be fiercely unpopular, but it's something that's going to be necessary for the long-term sustainability of the country.
So last question from me. Obviously, I get your point, and I think that you may find yourself, you're saying you want to be a centralist party, but as the Overton window continues to shift, you may find yourself in the world of Helen Zille, where you were once almost like centre-left, but you're now considered far-right. So
I think it started to happen already.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look at our positions on a number of things, including the position we took on vaccine and vax mandates, etc., I think the political spectrum has moved to the right. And I look at some of the work being done by European liberal parties. they're far more social democrat than liberals. I look at the Lib Dems in Britain, for instance. I think they are more social democrat than liberal.
I'm going to, sorry, I don't want to interrupt you. This isn't actually my last question. I have a different question. But, okay, so the actual question, I'm going to let you continue to do that. But one of the things we've seen quite a lot is, obviously, of recent, the DA issued something about how dare the government destroy all the vaccines that are expiring. They should have a deadline. That's angered a lot of people because they're like, why is the DA pushing the vaccine mandates? Because we don't want them. We don't want the vaccines, and you know that as well as the rest.
Well, I think there are people who want vaccines, and I don't think that we should let vaccines that we've paid for and where there is a demand expire. I mean, I made a choice not to have the third vaccine, and that's my personal choice. There are other people I know who were very anxious to have that third vaccine, and that's their choice. I think it's more about the wasted expenditure on the vaccines, where we spent a huge amount of public money.
But it's not vaccine mandates.
No, it's not vaccine mandates at all. And our position remains, if you want to get vaccinated, get vaccinated. If you don't want to get vaccinated, don't get vaccinated. That's an individual's choice. It's not up to a government to decide what you put into your body and what you don't.
So my last question is, given the state of South Africa, what are your feelings about a party like the DA pushing forward the equivalent of a First and Second Amendment?
So that's the right to
the freedom of speech and the right to bear arms.
Well, I mean, we fundamentally believe in the freedom of speech and in the freedom of people to be able to say what they want, and it's the old Sharansky test that you can only test whether your freedom of speech by being able to stand in the village square and say whatever you want without fear of prosecution. I fundamentally believe in the right to bear arms. I'm a firearm owner myself. I believe that firearms are necessary, particularly in a country like South Africa, where there is a complete failure of the security services to keep us safe. And I think that responsible firearm ownership, as we saw in July last year in KZN, is actually beneficial to South Africa. Because let me tell you, the police in that situation, I was on the ground, were completely overwhelmed. They were outmaneuvered, outgunned, and out-ammunitioned by the looters and rioters. And what filled the gap was private firearm owners who were able to step in and man the barricades when the police could not. And I think that is a positive sign of responsible gun ownership, and shows that a society is better off with responsible gun owners as part of it. And we should be encouraging responsible gun ownership instead of trying to criminalize everybody in the country who owns a firearm, as Becky Clelia, the Firearms Amendment Bill, is attempting to do.
So I'm going to thank you for that. I'm going to say, with us actually discussing this, but thank you for answering some questions that I asked to a former colleague of yours that after an hour and 30 he still couldn't answer. So that was amazing. Thank you.
Good.
John, I just want to say thank you so much for allowing us onto your show. Maybe you should just tell the audience to like and subscribe to your channel.
Great. So if you like what you've seen today, click like, please subscribe. The Morning Shot, your best way to get up in the morning.